Welcome again to Wagons of Steel. It's a party and everyone's still invited. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about buying and selling old cars, junk, being a junk master, selling crazy old crap from the yard. This week I'm clearing this car out. My friend is going to come over and take this one away. He's going to turn it into a gasser. So that's my favorite kind of car to sell to someone, something that's going to be turned into a race car. Makes it easier on the paperwork. So today it's just going to be kind of random thoughts about buying and selling stuff. Speaking of paperwork, this car is going to be sold. Well, not really even sold, it's just going to be traded. Yeah, and used as a race car. So it's not going to have any paperwork with it. It never had any. And you know, there's places where you can get paperwork for cars, and you should never buy a car without a title. This car's getting traded, and I know that it's free and clear. Nobody stole this car, and he's just going to turn it into a race car, and it's going to be fine. But as a general rule, don't buy a car without a title. I got this car without a title, and I can't even remember exactly how I got it. Well, actually, I sort of can. My friend picked it up. You can see an angry boyfriend kicked the doors. And she doesn't want the car anymore. It's long gone. I don't have to worry about it. But in general, I try to not have any cars in my yard that don't have titles on them. Just makes life simpler. The guy who's getting this car from me is a friend, and so I'm cleaning it out for him. But in general, if you're selling a car, maybe this is just a pet peeve of mine, but if you're selling a car online or anywhere and you want to get money out of it, clean the car up, for crying out loud. I mean, I was on Craigslist, one of my favorite places to haunt for cool old cars, and I saw something called the Dude, which is a type of pickup truck that Dodge made for a year or two, and it was like a sporty pickup truck, you know. And it said Dude on the back of it. I mean, who can resist a rig that says Dude on it? It says Dude, and it's got a white hat on it, and I guess they didn't make that many of them. And the guy was trying to sell it for $10,000. Well, I don't know if the Dude is ever worth $10,000, but it certainly wasn't worth $10,000 with grass growing out of the bumper, a load of crap in the back. I mean, you're selling a pickup truck. If you're trying to sell it for $10,000, I think it'd be worth taking the time to clean all the crap out of the bed. Speaking of $10,000, when you're selling a rig, it's really important to know what it's worth, what you want out of it, what other ones are selling for. Got cool enough DVDs in the back of it. Sometimes, I mean, it can go either way. Sometimes people can sell cars and not really know what they sold. I mean, a lot of times, like one of the cars in my yard is I did a whole video about it. My 65 Plymouth it's worth thousands of dollars because it was a very rare car, and we got it for less than $1,000, and the guy thought, oh, this is just junk, it doesn't have an engine in it. Well, you know, it's his loss. I'm not gonna demand to pay more. VCR tape. Devil's Advocate, 1-day rental. A lot of war stuff in this car. Panasonic. Pair of Sony speakers. Cleaning out cars is always a pain in the butt. But you never know what you're going to find. Ooh, flashlight. A clock. Stay on target. Ooh, some fine art. You never know what you're going to find in one of these things. Mostly trash. It's a ferryman. One time years ago, I scored a 1960 something, I want to say 64 Plymouth Valiant. It's kind of a cool car. It's like a little notchback Barracuda. Oh, look at this. Wagons of Steel. 20 years. 2014, 6-year-old t-shirt. So anyways, scored this old Valiant. And I was cleaning it out as I do. And in the back, in the trunk was a about 8 or 10 inches of standing water. And, you know, digging around in that, like, what am I going to find in here? Hopefully it's not like the monster from the trash compactor in Star Wars. It gets kind of creepy sometimes. There's all kinds of weird fungus and mungus. So I started fishing around in there. I found a plug in the bottom and pulled the plug out so the water drained out. And lo and behold were these weird little pieces of cardboard with holes in them. And after a little while, I figured out that it was like a coin keeper, I guess is what you would call it. It's like for collecting coins. And kept digging around, and eventually I started finding pennies and in the water. So these pennies, there were a lot of them. And I kept digging and digging and finding more and more pennies, and I put them all into some container I found. And I kept digging, and you know, there are lots of beer bottles. There's usually a lot of beer bottles in these old projects. And then a collection, a starter set of Craftsman tools. That was pretty nice. You know, the open end wrenches and the sockets and the socket driver. And then I brought all the stuff home and I started looking at the pennies, and lo and behold, it was a complete set of pennies going all the way back to, God, I want to say 1902. I still have them stashed somewhere. You know, pennies are funny because people always, just like a lot of collectibles, people will say, oh, that penny's worth, you know, what if some astronomical figure, and then, well, if somebody ever offers you a bunch of money for a penny, take it. You're not going to get shit out of pennies. But still, it's pretty cool. Look at this car. I found a set of 19 or 2000 and something electric Dodge Charger seats. Of course, I can't get the tailgate down. Lift with your back, not your knees. Twist and lift. Well, I hope you weren't expecting this to actually be useful information about buying and selling cars. Which brings up an interesting point. Buying and selling versus trading, cash versus something else, is the eternal question. You know, if you need money to pay for something, that's one thing. But if you don't absolutely need the money, it's really worth considering trading, because, you know, if you sell something for the cash, that kind of sets the mark right there. So I guess an easier way to explain it is, in 1989, I had a 1969 Dodge Super Bee, which, you know, if I didn't have my race car, which is the coolest car ever made, I'd still feel really sad about this, and I still feel kind of sad. But I needed cash, and I had my 1969 Super Bee, and I sold it for $2,000. And it was a running car. It was a 383 Magnum, functional hood scoops, bench seat, brown, black interior, automatic. It was a cool car. I had some really good adventures in that car. It was a long time ago. And like I say, I needed the money, and I always kind of regarded the car as kind of a bank account. I paid it $1,700 for it in the first place. So I was like, wow, I make $300 after joyriding in the car for a couple of years. And well, needless to say now, if that car were to burn to the ground and you were to take the burned hood off of that car, you could sell that for $1,700. So, or $2,000. Basically what I'm saying is that cash isn't worth nothing now, but if I traded it for a 1969 Roadrunner or something else, then that Roadrunner would be worth $10,000 now. I'm just picking numbers out of space, but if you trade for something cool, then that will appreciate in value. If you cash out, then it's just worth the cash at the time. Cash never appreciates, unless of course it's a 1902 penny. The question I get asked a lot is, how much is this car worth? Not this car necessarily, but just any given car. And you know, it's kind of cliche to say this, but you know, cliches a lot of the time come from the truth. A car's worth whatever anybody will pay you for it. And so it's good to always, like when you're selling a car or buying a car, it's really good to have an idea in your mind what it's worth before you buy or sell. And you know, be ready to walk away. And that's true with new cars too. I mean, it's amazing what happens when you walk away. If you go into a dealership and say, I want this car, and they tell you how much they want to charge you, and you tell them how much you want to pay, and if you can't come to an agreement, get in your car and watch it, you know, watch what happens. Most of the time a manager will come out and start trying to get you back into the dealership. Not that I go buy new cars very often. But with these old cars, you know, if we're talking cliches, they don't make them anymore. And they're only original ones. This car's unrestored, so I could, you know, say ran when parked, which in this case is actually true, which is kind of like a laughable cliche. We always joke about that with each other. Oh, it ran when it was parked. And, you know, like the car with the tree growing through it and stuff. But I go to Craigslist a lot to look at cars, and I have enough cars in my yard, just ask my wife, but so I'm not usually actually trying to buy cars when I look at them online. I just like to know what stuff is selling for, what's out there, what people are interested in. And sometimes that'll give you an idea of what something's worth. It kind of works against me that I've been doing this for a long time because, you know, kind of like with the Super Bee story, stuff is worth so much more than it used to be. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to buy cars. I mean, if you paid $500 for a car, it came with a good battery in it. It would start up, drive around, have, you know, you could hold air in the tires. And now $500, that really won't do that anymore. I mean, pretty much $1,000 is the new $500. And that's just the way it is. When it comes to figuring out what something's worth, race cars are the worst. They have so much blood, sweat, and tears in them, and inevitably it seems like they sell for pennies on the dollar. This one, when we first got it done, we were racing in Boise, Idaho. I think it might have been I think it was our first official NHRA event, and this guy came up to us, this, you know, really rich guy, and he said, "How much you want for that car?" And, you know, we'd spent so much time and money on it, and we're just barely starting to race it. Like, oh, God, I don't know. And he said he would trade us a 1964 Hemi, still in the crate, you know, wrapped in Cosmoline or whatever. And it probably would have been a decent trade, but God, we just couldn't make ourselves do that. We're going to have some fun with this car. And in the end, I'm glad we didn't, but still, whew, makes you think. I mean, what is a 1964 race Hemi in the original crate worth? We first bought this car for $800, and that was, I think, 2002. And it was a runner. I've told you the story of this car before. It was it had never been owned by anybody who knew much about cars, and so it had some deferred maintenance issues, we'll say. And so it was really unsafe. It needed a lot of work to be even drivable. And so we started to work on it. And so like $800 to get the car in the first place. And then, just off the top of my head, it's got like a $2,000 rear end in it. And $1,000 transmission. And I mean, the engine's been built and rebuilt and blown up and rebuilt and replaced over and over and over again. But we'll say at any given moment, the engine's probably worth $20,000. It's got probably $1,500 worth of wheels, not counting tires. You can't count tires. Of course, it didn't come with a good battery in it. It's got gauges, all kinds of electronic ignition stuff, fancy shifters. I mean, you can see it adds up quick. I think probably you could easily get to $35,000, $40,000 in the money that we put into it before you even count any labor. And the labor is all very specialized. I mean, you find somebody who can do the work that my crew chief does, or that I do, or that any of the other guys who help us this thing do. and you're paying, you know, at least $100 an hour. So, I mean, really, you can't imagine how you would ever sell this old station wagon for what you have into it. So there's a lesson to be learned there. Don't invest in race cars you build yourself. People always have to sell them off for pennies on a dollar. And this car is, you know, the only way you're going to get a car like this is to build it yourself, because there's no such thing as a car like this, really. I mean, there's people always remember them and they say they're out there, but I don't know. I don't believe it. I don't see them. But I guess if you're going to buy a race car, go buy somebody else's race car project and make it your own. That's the way a smart guy would do it. So that's my advice if you're looking at getting into a race car. One last piece of buy-sell race car advice is the motor isn't worth anything. If you're selling, take the motor out. Sell it without the motor. Or be ready to take a bath, because the motor is not worth anything. If you're buying, the motor's not worth anything. I mean, there's no sense. It just doesn't make any sense to insult people who are selling to you. But you don't know. I mean, it's probably just a pile of junk. And you know, if your race engines are they're just built to be abused. They're just sacrificial. So that's my other piece of advice: is the motor and the transmission, probably junk. Plan accordingly. Buying and selling cars is a good way to stay in touch with the hobby, and to you meet interesting people, you see cool stuff. It's kind of like a form of archaeology to me. I've always been a history guy. I like historic stuff, and I like the forms of old cars. And it has made me some money. It's you know, it keeps the race operation going somewhat. Lots of bits and pieces here and there that I've sold for decent money, you know, knowing what stuff is worth and selling it and letting people know it's out there. You know, there's pitfalls, but it's fun. This won't be the last time I talk about buying and selling old cars for money. I'll try and offer a useful piece of advice each time or two. See, this time my useful advice will be buy low, sell high, and do as little as you can between those two events, because very rarely do you make any money back by fixing up an old car. It's better to just get it for a really cheap price and then sell it for what it's worth. There it is. I'll try and think up something more useful next time, but in the meantime, have fun, buy low, sell high.